let's talk about sex.
Yeah,
Sex, baby. So we've got an amazing panel. We've got Billie, Steph, and Saba. Billie, I'm going to kick off with you because I've known you the longest. You launched Ferly this year. I would love if you could tell everyone what you're actually trying to do at Ferly, and especially how you're thinking about sexual health as a key pillar of our health.
Before I start, can I just do a little temp check on the audience? Because this is a really different audience to a British stiff upper lip audience. So how many of you are slightly uncomfortable in your seats right now about the idea of sex? Oh my gosh, that is...
Got a lot of women.
No one.
I like it.
That's like a sea of hands in England.
Oh,
so this is like a more fun, we can push it further, I think, the conversation
Okay.
today. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Ferly. As Lina just said, we are a young sexual well-being company which launched this year. And we are on a mission to make sex education simple, sensual, and unashamedly normal for the adult audience. Predominantly right now, we serve women because there's a pleasure gap. Women have less sexual pleasure than men. Our app delivers content and community. We deliver guided practices which help women explore their mind and their body, sensual stories to awaken desire and explore fantasies and boundaries, and little short podcast-style pieces that give you the 101 on sexy science.
Thank you.
That's us.
Steph, you co-founded MysteryVibe, which became one of the most predominantly sex toy companies in the UK, which you co-founded in 2014. You stepped away earlier this year, but tell us a little bit about how you came from being a management consultant at Deloitte to founding a sex toy company.
Yeah, so we started the company in 2014, but we actually came up with the idea for it in about 2008. I met my co-founder our first day at Deloitte as graduates, and we became firm friends, and we just throw ideas around. And it came from two places, really. The idea that people were having less sex, and being a management consultant, you're traveling all the time, you're in hotels, you have conversations about these kinds of things. And then at the same time, the concept of no two bodies are the same. Everyone has slightly different parts down there, and so why wasn't there some kind of flexible piece of hardware that could adapt to your body? And that kind of became brand and first product idea, and it all went from there, really.
Yeah, amazing. Saba's come from really far. She's come from Karachi in Pakistan. And when I first heard the story about what she's building, I thought that's really, really brave. You're building a chatbot that educates young girls on menstrual hygiene and reproductive health. How did you come to it?
Yeah. So I started off as a journalist, and I was reporting about women's stories, especially around honor and especially around their empowerment or their lack of empowerment. And I was actually doing a film screening of this animated cartoon that we had made on menstrual hygiene, which is a huge topic and a much needed topic and discourse in Pakistan. And when we were showing our cartoon, suddenly girls realized that they had a lot of questions about this topic, and all of their hands went up. And so we tried to answer to the best of our knowledge, and then we packed up and we came back to Karachi. This was in a rural area. And I used to wonder at that point that, what happens? I mean, do these questions remain unanswered? How do we build a sustainable conversation with them that they don't feel ashamed to go and ask? So the same cartoon character became the person who's our chatbot. And the first version that we built was absolutely shit. Most of the conversations did not work. But all that data helped us to actually build a better chatbot. And we're still experimenting, and we now have all the topics that are important for girls in Pakistan, especially from the urban areas. In rural areas, technology still is not as prevalent, so accessibility there. But I think all of this will change in the next 5 years because internet infrastructure is growing, and they're cheap smartphones, and hopefully girls will have access to technology and they'll have access to our app.
Amazing, thank you. I want to talk about funding for the sex tech sector more broadly, because we have 3 really interesting different funding stories. I can also share an anecdote. I work for an early stage investor called firstminute Capital. We funded a sex education company called O School. They're based in SF. And we probably had one of our most fun and interesting investment committees when we were talking about butt plugs. We were talking about dildos. It was pretty unusual, and probably the first time when we've got 3 partners in the room. Slightly uncomfortable, but we ended up investing. So why don't we kick off with you, Billie, because you've decided to go the VC route.
Yes.
You have actually closed a pretty good round, which is not yet announced,
Yeah.
but we can say you've closed a round. Would love to understand what your experience was trying to raise, and yeah, why you decided to go the VC route and how you found it.
Yeah. So we actually devised, came to life Ferly out of a program called Zinc, which was a 6-month business builder program in the UK. And they brought 50 people together who, across 3 different kind of sectors, and gave them a mission and asked them to build businesses that would address this mission. And the mission was to transform the mental and emotional health of women and girls in the developed world. And their philosophy was that there's some amazing social entrepreneurs out there that really care about social impact issues. And then there's all this VC money that typically doesn't go to those entrepreneurs because those entrepreneurs don't have the mindset, the mind frame, or the capability necessarily to want to raise and build a really big global business and to scale a really big global business. And so they wanted to bring these minds together with this money, and so that some of this amazing money could go to causes that really mattered. So we were always destined to raise or try and attempt to raise VC money. When we decided the topic of sex and female pleasure, we got a lot of apprehension from everyone. We were told, my co-founder's a woman as well, so we were told, you're 2 young, first-time female entrepreneurs talking about sex. What are you doing? You'll never get funded. This is ridiculous. You'll get laughed out of the room. No one's investing in this space. Like, VCs won't invest in this. Pick a better, different topic. But there's such a huge unmet need here, and I think that as soon as the investors are able to see the opportunity and you present it in a way that they understand, it was kind of a no-brainer, and we actually had a really easy fundraising route. And I kind of say that sheepishly because I know that a lot of sex tech companies that have come before us haven't had such an easy ride. But we got a commitment on our last day of sort of pitching, so we spent 3 months every other week pitching on this program. And on the last day, we got taken into a room from a VC, and they sat us down, and they said, guys, we love it, we're going to invest. And the 3 of us, we were 3 co-founders at the time, we had no idea what had just happened, and we kind of looked at them, didn't say anything, walked out of the room, walked back to our desk, carried on working, and about an hour later, one of them messaged and said, guys, I think we just got funded. We were like, fuck, I think we did. And so that was the very early round, and then the second one that we've just closed, again, it was all inbound interest. So I think that speaks to how the market is shaping as well as the product that we're building.
What's it like pitching to men with a product that's primarily aimed at women?
So I think this is also something quite strange, but our investors are majority female, which is really exciting. So we have 2 female partners in the first VC that we invested in. We had a female angel, really amazing female angel, and then we had another female VC who was like heading up an angel syndicate that had women in it. So we did pitch to men, obviously, but they were always accompanied by a woman. Yeah. So yeah, I think we were really lucky in that way. And I think Steph will share some, and Steph will share some more horror stories, but we got a few ridiculous comments. They either wanted it just to be porn, even though they have like a Vice policy where you can't invest in porn. So it's like, why do you want this to be porn? You can't invest in porn. Or they thought that women were a niche market. That was a fun one. Yeah, that was a fun one. They were like, they're really niche. We're so fucking niche. Yeah, all 50% of us.
Steph, you went the angel route, so you didn't actually take any VC money. You started in 2014, so pre-Me Too. What was it like? And was it a choice that you went with angel money, or did you try and pitch VCs and there was just no market for it?
It wasn't for lack of trying. That's I can tell you that right now. So yeah, we founded the business in 2014. Over the first 4 years, raised about 4 million, all from angels. the cap table is complicated. But yeah, we initially kind of thought that we would go down the VC route, spoke to so many of them, and they're very happy to take the meetings and learn more about the space and learn more about what you're doing and have nice chats about sex and how you're solving problems, but then would turn around. I still remember getting emails or people, especially an email that was like, yeah, we just don't do sex at this VC. And I was like, oh, really?
Wow.
But yeah, so we ended up raising from angels, which has its own incredible advantages. It means that we've got angels on our cap table who provide so much added value in terms of their expertise from their careers. But also it just meant that we knew we were finding people who would either be, when we spoke to angels, they would either be really just not into it or so passionate about it that they just wanted to get involved and just help you as much as they could. And so that kind of helped in a way.
Yeah.
There was no one dispassionate about it. They were either passionately not into it or passionately into it. So,
do you think it would be easier today to go out and raise VC money for MysteryVibe?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when we first started raising this whole no sex, no drugs, the term T's and C's in the bottom from LPs was just everywhere. It was so hard to even think about raising money for sex from a VC, but now you see people coming out specifically wanting to invest in taboo topics or in sex. So yeah, it would be perhaps easier, but
we still had to put well-being rather than sexual well-being when it went out to the LPs. So even though they were like totally for it, they were like really supportive, when it went to their LPs, we had to remove sex from any mention of it, which we did find ridiculous because it's sex. But
from my perspective, there's been a lot more sex tech companies. Even in the last year, I can see a real increase in companies coming to pitch us. And I think from my perspective as well, there is a shift in that investors realize that there is money in sex tech, but it's slow. So I think you'll see a lot of people taking a lot of meetings. It's trendy and it's kind of cool and it's interesting and it's sexy, right? But a lot of people won't really put their money where their mouth is quite yet, I think.
I see it with especially VCs a lot. They're kind of caught between the fear of missing out, especially on an industry that is really taking off, and the fear of making a bad deal. And like they're always caught in the middle. And so the best thing that they can do is just kind of wait and see what happens with the sector. And I feel like there's still a lot of that waiting happening now.
I think the interesting thing though, like just to talk about taking the meetings, we did find this and continue to find this, that people, when you come and talk to them about this, they will take a meeting because they just desperately want to share a story about their own sexuality. So that is the strangest thing, is you go there thinking you're going to like talk about an investment opportunity, and you come out there being like, oh, okay, this guy's got like erectile dysfunction, and he's not like had sex with his wife for 5 years, and now I'm a therapist. So I know some like very intimate details now about the VC landscape in London, which is lovely.
Saba, I want to hear your story, because when we talked on the phone before this panel, Saba was like, if I talk about the funding story, I don't want to be a downer because it's been really, really frustrating for me. And you've relied mostly on grants, some foundation money. Tell us what it's been like to raise in a country like Pakistan.
I think if I knew how challenging it would be, I would probably not have started the company altogether. I think I was really, really naive to think that the real problem existed in Pakistan. Sex education was not there. I'll give you a quick context to where I live. So we've got 200 million people in Pakistan. Roughly 100 million are girls and women. We happen to have the highest abortion rate in the world. Contraceptive usage is the lowest. And most girls, 1 out of 3, drop out of school the first time that they start their period. So you would assume with all of these problems, if a company stepped up or an organization stepped up to solve it through tech, lots of people would be excited. And especially the government would be excited because you're taking a lot of the strain off them. But that wasn't the case at all. I remember meetings where I've pitched to investors, and there are very few in Pakistan. And the whole time while I was pitching, they wouldn't make eye contact with me. And I felt like I wasn't even human in that room. And like 5 minutes later, when my pitch ended, these 2 gentlemen came in with a car rental startup, and these guys got up and shook their hands. And suddenly there was eye contact, and their pitch was absolutely different. And it makes you feel really, really like you're not doing something of value. But had it not been for the foundations and had it not been for the grants that we received, we were able to build our prototype and get to a stage where now we were recently selected as an MIT solver. We're going to New York. I'm going to New York tomorrow to actually pitch our product. So these validations, if they weren't there locally or in Pakistan, it would have really been hard for us to even get to this stage.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. I would like to talk a little bit more about the macro environment, and we touched upon it a little bit before. Actually, no, sorry, before that, because this is really fun, I want to hear about the worst thing that an investor has either asked you in a meeting, or the weirdest thing. You can pick each of the two in your fundraising stories.
Mine was less from an investor, more from, I think this gives you a sense of, whilst we had a relatively, and I say, it wasn't the easiest of journeys, but compared to stories like that, we feel very guilty almost about how easy it's been for us. But more around the taboo that still exists. Like, it's amazing to see that none of you put your hands up when I said how uncomfortable are you going to be during this panel. Because in the UK, it honestly makes people still squirm and blush and say really awkward things. And I remember we came out of a series of back-to-back investor meetings, and we came back into a room of entrepreneurs, and a couple of the older entrepreneurs in the room, white, male, middle-aged men, called us the blowjob girls and asked if we'd given out blowjobs to get investment. And I don't know whether it was through jealousy that we were the first team to get invested in, or whether it was banter or humor. But these are the attitudes that you still have to come up against and you still have to dismantle. And that is really infuriating.
It was that easy to get investment.
Yeah.
Just give a few.
Just give a few blowjobs out.
Steph, how about you? You've got a few stories.
Pretty similar. The questions, having spent the last 10 minutes pitching on a vibrator, having someone turn around and say, but do women even really like this? It was just like bizarre. But yeah, being hit on by investors, journalists, other startup founders at events very similar to this in the last 5 years has always been fun. I think people, especially before the Me Too thing really kicked off, there was this opinion that I often came up against that was, because I work in sex, I'm therefore A, up for it all the time, and B, up for it with them, which neither were true. So I guess probably the worst one was an investor who turned around to me and said, it's a shame I didn't meet you a year ago, because when we would have sex, you'd be exactly half my age. Oh. And I was like, sorry, what? Oh. Also the same age as my daughter. I was like, okay, this conversation is over. See you later.
So sorry.
But hey.
Yeah. Saba, what about you?
Yeah, I was reading up on how to raise funding, and they told me to do an FFF round, family, friends, and fools. So I went up to some family members who I thought would support me, and when I shared my big pitch, they're like, my God, you've become a Western agent completely. You're pushing these values that are not from our culture, that are not from our society, and you're a sellout. And thank God I didn't take that too seriously, and I continued. Yeah. Otherwise, I would have stopped.
Yeah, that's
I have to say, one amazing thing about some of these shit stories is that there is a real sense of camaraderie between women who founded businesses in this space. Like, I've had owners of peer companies send me their investment spreadsheets to see who they pitched and who not to pitch.
Really?
Or sharing contacts. And I mean, even sitting here, I have probably an amazing contact for you that I could share with you. And there's this real sense of camaraderie between female founders in the space, which is, I don't think there's any other industry that has that sense. Yeah.
I think with investing in this as well, or building a business in this, I think you get people, especially women founders, that are very mission-focused. Like, both of us are building mission-driven companies, and your identity is attached to that in a way as well. But when we're investing, it's as if there's the business that we're investing, and then there's who we are as women. And sometimes they look through that and say, you're a provocative woman who is, as kind of Steph just said, totally up for sex. You must be a dominatrix. You must just, and then that's just... you have to get over that initial barrier of who they think you are before you're even able to present the business case for why this is a good opportunity. And I don't think that many people have to come up against that when they're trying to raise money.
From a macro perspective, do you think that there is a shift right now and we're actually going to see more money flowing into sex tech? Or do you think we need bigger exits? There's not been that many yet. Do we think we need more understanding? Do we need more female investors on partnership at partner level? Like, what do you think the investment community needs to realize the opportunity?
Yeah, I think what Steph said, you know, investors are sheep. There are very few that actually lead and are willing to take, I mean, obviously everyone is taking a risk, but like take that extra risk. And I think that's when you have a different category of an investor and you know, like a tier 1 investor who really bets on these early stage companies.
Yeah.
And the difficulty with that is when they start to make, they will only have one or tops 2 in their portfolio through conflict. So you need a few more of those tier 1 companies coming out, investing in the really early stage young companies, because this is such a young industry still. And I think you need a little bit of a wake-up call, not a naming and a shaming, but the investors need to know that, you can't speak to female entrepreneurs in the way that they do, because otherwise it is completely demoralizing and you find it really hard to continue. And it's really important that we continue because this matters for gender equality. This isn't just a frivolous pastime. This is a really important issue. And yeah, I think
Can we
it's the
talk
early
about
stage.
what Me Too did to this industry? Because maybe actually starting with you, Steph, because you were in the industry before we had Me Too, before Time's Up was a thing. From my perspective, it's actually changed my work a lot. It's changed the way that we discuss things. It's changed the way that we hire in VC. And it's really had a big impact. So did you feel that a lot in the MysteryVibe story in 2017?
Yeah, I did see a bit of a shift, and I think it kind of goes beyond that whole yes, I'll invest in you, can we take a meeting in my bedroom, like type conversations, which definitely happened before. I definitely see less and less of that happening. But even things on how we talk about sex in the workplace. So, for example, we would always hire people who are very open-minded about sex, but at the same time, there are things that perhaps shouldn't be discussed or come up or when you're working. So I think, it has kind of shifted some of the
second order effects.
I think so. I think it's been really positive. Especially more around the kind of the external relationships, but also within companies. And I know that different companies within our space have taken kind of different lines in terms of, okay, we're hiring people who have they're very passionate about sexuality. They're very open-minded. They might like to talk about these things. Do we allow people to bring their entire sexual selves into the workplace, or do we have specific policies in terms of we can't talk about this and how things are handled? And I know different companies have taken different stances on that.
At least you think about it.
Yeah, exactly. Those conversations are happening, and that's a good thing.
How much of Me Too did you see in Pakistan? How much did it impact conversation?
It did, and especially in the tech industry, it did. There was a certain case that revealed that a certain founder had been treating his employees, female employees, harassing them, and he's still working, and he is still there. So I think with Me Too, the onus or the fault of sexual harassment still lies, or is still a woman's fault. It's always, and it continues to be. I want to highlight something which will continue to be a downer from my side. But yesterday I was reading back home in Pakistan in an area which is called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Girls are told that from the ages of 5 onwards, they should cover their heads, especially because cases of sexual violence, molestation, they've risen up. So the way to control or the way to take the women have to take responsibility for it. And the way to protect ourselves against harassment is by covering ourselves. And even if you run a search and you write women's safety or products, the thing that comes up is a burqa. Instead of maybe a pepper spray or something else. And I was just like, oh my God, this has to change. And what kind of, what's the algorithm that's making this pop up in Pakistan?
We have 1 minute, so I'm keeping time. But I want one line of each of you of what you would like to see built in the sex tech industry. You're all tackling like, really big problems. You can't solve every problem. What would you like to see built that you can't build yourself? Billie.
Oh, I can't build ourselves.
Well, you might want to build yourself, but you're not building yet. I feel like Steph.
Yeah, I think I really love this conversation as well, because I feel like when we talk about sex and tech, we often talk about sex robots, and it's such an overdone conversation. I think when we think about sex tech, especially with the future, we often try and add so much tech to it that just doesn't make sense just because we want to make it more techy, or we think about weird people at home alone wanking. Actually, I think one of the amazing things that sex tech can do is help people who can't or who aren't experiencing an amazing sex life, help elevate them. So one of the things I'm really interested in, for example, is how sex tech can be more accessible, especially for people with disabilities.
Super interesting.
Yeah, I'm just going to add that I'd love to see, this might be off topic, but role models like these girls doing it, raising funding, building great companies, because it's going to have an effect in countries like Pakistan, and there'll be more belief in it, and there'll be more VCs, hopefully more female venture capitalists, and things will look up for generations to come.
Great.
And I'd like to see gender bias removed from advertising. I think that is one of the big areas. If we're going to really elevate female sexual pleasure or any of these female taboo topics, then we need to stop prioritizing the male experience over the female experience. So anyone that can take down Facebook.
I look forward to that. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. You're all great. So thank you for joining my panel.
Everyone.